asked her that question because I genuinely wanted to understand what had shaped her, what experiences she'd been through before we met. But her reaction made it clear there was more beneath the surface. So, let me start from the top. My name's Amanda, and if there's one thing life has taught me, it's that appearances can open doors you didn't even realize were there. That's not arrogance, it's just reality. From as far back as I can remember, people noticed me. The kind of attention that makes you feel like you're walking around with a neon sign flashing. Look at me. As a child, it was innocent enough. Teachers giving me extra smiles or classmates eager to be my friend. But by high school, things had shifted. The boys weren't just noticing, they were infatuated. And let's just say I quickly figured out how to use that to my benefit. And let's just say I quickly figured out how to use that to my benefit. I'm not proud of everything, okay? But when you're 17 and a smile can get you out of writing a 10-page paper or land you a cushy summer job your friends would kill for, you start to think, why not? College was when I truly mastered the game. Professors gave me extensions on assignments without batting an eye. Promotions at work seemed to come my way faster than usual. Even friends didn't seem to mind picking up the tab, flashing me a smile and saying, "You're so sweet, don't worry about it." I know it sounds manipulative, but at the time, it didn't feel that way. It just seemed natural. Of course, all that attention came with a downside. When people constantly cater to you, it messes with your mind. You start believing you're untouchable, that you can control anyone with the right smile. I wouldn't call it arrogance, but I'll admit my ego got inflated. A lot. And why wouldn't it? When the world keeps telling you you're special, you start to believe it. But there was another side to it all. My relationships, if you could even call them that, were shallow. I don't just mean romantic ones. Even friendships felt transactional. And as for the guys I dated, it was the same story every time. They'd fall hard for me, I'd keep them at a distance, and eventually I'd get bored. In a strange way, it felt empowering to be the one in control, but it left me feeling empty. By my mid-20s, I'd embraced casual flings like they were some badge of honor. I'd tell myself it was freeing to say, I don't need a man to complete me. But the truth? That lifestyle is lonely. At first, you don't notice because you're too busy convincing yourself you're living your best life. Then, one night, you're scrolling through Instagram and it hits you. Everyone else seems to have figured out something you haven't. Let me be honest, I'm 27 and I've been with a lot of men. I used to justify it as finding myself or embracing my freedom, but if I'm being real, what was I looking for? Validation? Power? Maybe both. And now I want something different. I'm so tired of the games, of pretending I'm fine, being the fun girl, but never the one you introduce to your family. I want stability, someone who sees more than just my looks, someone I can be genuine with. That's why I decided to make a change. No more hookups, no more casual relationships. I want something real, something meaningful. That decision brought me here to this moment, to Albert. He's unlike anyone I've ever known. Kind, thoughtful, a little reserved. There's something safe about the way he carries himself, like he doesn't feel the need to prove anything to me. For the first time, I want to really try. But there's a voice in the back of my head whispering, what if he finds out about your past? Because let's be honest, people judge. I've judged. And the last thing I want is for Albert to see me the way I sometimes see myself, broken. I have worked too hard to convince myself that I'm not. So here I am, Amanda, trying to start fresh, hoping to leave my mistakes behind and find something real. Whether Albert is my forever or just the first step on this new journey, I'm ready to find out. It's Albert here. When I first met Amanda, I wasn't expecting to feel much. We worked in the same office, but had never really interacted until one day we ended up chatting in the break room. At first glance, sure, she was undeniably attractive, but what caught my attention was her confidence. It seemed effortless, like she wasn't trying too hard, but still knew exactly what she wanted out of life. Mhm. I remember thinking how rare that was, especially around here. Most people are either full of themselves or too shy to speak up. Amanda was different. She was funny, sharp, and had this unique way of standing out without even trying. We ended up talking for what felt like hours about everything from work frustrations to random hobbies. When I finally looked at the clock, I couldn't believe how much time had passed. Our first few dates were simple. Nothing fancy, just a casual dinner here, a walk in the park there. But there was something about the way we talked that made it all feel easy, natural, not awkward or forced. I appreciated that. After a few weeks, I started feeling like I might be onto something special. One night after dinner, she asked me, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, curious. "What's your take on relationships? What do you want?" Her directness caught me off guard, but that's something I respected about her. She didn't beat around the bush. For Amanda, it was either real or it wasn't. "Well," I replied honestly, "I guess I'm looking for something meaningful, not the casual stuff, you know? I want something real, something that lasts. I don't know if that's what you're after, but that's where I'm at." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked at me for what felt like forever, like she was really taking in what I'd said. It felt like she was genuinely listening, which is something I hadn't experienced much in past relationships. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she shrugged and her usual smirk returned. "I get it. Same here. I'm not really into the casual thing either." As we spent more time together, I started opening up about my past. Um, Not everything, just the basics I thought were important. I told her about the serious relationship I'd had a few years ago with someone I deeply cared about. We had made plans for the future, but life kind of added other ideas. And when she moved overseas for work, we decided to part ways. It was tough, but I respected her choice. After that, I dated a few people here and there, but nothing serious. I wasn't looking to rush into anything and figured the right connection would come along when it was meant to. One evening, after hours of laughing and talking, I decided to bring it up. I asked the question because I genuinely wanted to understand her, what she'd been through before we met, what had shaped her. But her reaction hinted there was more to her story than she let on. "Amanda," I said cautiously, "I've been thinking. We've talked about what we want for the future, but what about your past? What's your story? I mean, your dating experiences. I'm curious." She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes flickered as if she was debating whether or not to answer. Finally, she sighed and leaned back, folding her arms. "I'm not hiding anything from you, Albert," she said softly, though her voice carried a defensive edge I hadn't expected. "But there are things about my past that are complicated. Um, just not sure I'm ready to unpack it all yet." I could tell she wasn't trying to shut me out entirely, but it was clear there were parts of her past she wasn't ready to share. I understood and didn't want to push her, but I also didn't want to feel like I was in the dark. When Albert asked about my past, I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't something I wanted to discuss, not yet. Things between us had been going so well, everything feeling fresh and exciting, but his question threatened to unravel it all. We were sitting on the couch, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. I could feel the weight of his gaze as he asked, Amanda, I've told you about my past, but what about yours? What have you been through? It was such a simple question, but to me, it felt like a bombshell. I had been trying to keep my history buried where it couldn't interfere with what we were building, but now it was staring me in the face. I wasn't sure I was ready to confront it, let alone share it. I paused, swallowing hard as I stared at my hands. I didn't know where to start. This wasn't a conversation I had planned to have so soon, but I realized that if I didn't open up now, it could cause problems later. I've been with a lot of people, I finally said, my voice tight. A lot more than I'm comfortable admitting. Over 100 men. It wasn't about love or finding something meaningful. It was just, I don't know, a way to fill a void, I said, glancing at him. I could see the shock in Albert's eyes, though he didn't say anything. His silence felt heavier with each passing second, the distance between us growing. I kept going, knowing I had to. He needed to understand where I was coming from. At the time, it felt empowering, I continued, the words cutting into me, like I was in control, you know? But looking back, it was all so empty. I was running from real intimacy, and now I'm trying to change that. I don't want to be that person anymore. After what felt like forever, he finally spoke. His voice was calm, but there was a distance in it that wasn't there before. I don't know what to say, he admitted. That's a lot. I appreciate your honesty, but it's a lot to process. I nodded, feeling a wave of anxiety crash over me. This was exactly what I had feared. Hearing that he needed time to process, that he didn't know how to handle what I had just revealed. I wasn't sure if he was simply trying to absorb it all or if it was already too much for him. The conversation felt like it had shifted something, maybe between us or maybe just in how he saw me. I couldn't tell, but I hoped this would be the start of something more open and honest, despite the discomfort we both felt. As the silence stretched out, I tried to push away the nervousness. I had spoken my truth. Now it was his turn. I could only hope this wasn't the end for us. When Amanda finished talking about her past, it felt like her words were suffocating me. I had been I'd expecting something, but not that. Not the overwhelming number of men, not the casual encounters, and definitely not the emptiness she described. I was stunned, not so much by the sheer number, but by the way she seemed to talk about it so casually. I felt a knot twist in my stomach, the warmth in the room evaporating in an instant. I didn't know how to react to what she had just shared. My heart was racing, my mind shouting at me to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. My face flushed, my body tense, as a wave of disgust and disappointment swept over me. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but it was impossible to unhear what she'd just admitted. It was like a veil had been lifted, and I couldn't look at her the same way. For me, intimacy had always been something sacred, an act built on emotional connection, trust, and commitment. It wasn't just physical. It was about creating something meaningful between two people. That's what I had always believed. But hearing Amanda describe her history, like it was just a series of fleeting, meaningless moments. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't reconcile it. It felt like we were speaking two completely different languages when it came to intimacy and relationships. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Her past wasn't just a few bad choices, it was a pattern, a way of living that felt completely at odds with the kind of person I wanted to build a life with. I had always pictured a partner who shared my values, someone who saw intimacy as something meaningful, a connection that brought two people closer together. But Amanda's perspective felt so different, so detached, almost like she was playing by a completely different set of rules. It wasn't just about judging her, it was about the future. I couldn't ignore the depths creeping into my mind, depths I'd never felt before, a palsy and a memory of the past. I wanted to believe she could change, that she could move past her history and become the person I hoped she could be. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I might just be fooling myself. Could she really change? Or was I setting myself up for more heartache later on? I had to leave. The tension in the room was overwhelming, suffocating even, and I needed space to think clearly. Without much thought, I stood up and walked to the door, excusing myself with a flat, "I need some time to process this." My voice sounded distant, almost mechanical, like it wasn't even mine. Amanda looked confused, maybe hurt, but I couldn't bring myself to meet her eyes, not in that moment. I couldn't face her or my own emotions. I was too raw, and I needed to figure things out before I said something I'd regret. When I got to my car, I just sat there for what felt like forever, trying to steady my breathing and calm the chaos in my mind. But no matter how much I tried to make sense of it, there was no going back from what I'd heard. I knew what I had to do. I pulled out my phone and typed a short message. "Sorry, Amanda, that's too much baggage for me to handle. I think it's best we end things here." As soon as I sent it, I felt a strange sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted. But at the same time, it felt like I had closed a door I wasn't sure I could ever open again. I didn't want to be cruel, but the truth was, I couldn't move forward, not with her past, and not with the doubts already settling in. I'll never forget the way it felt when Albert pulled away that night. I had just laid everything bare, sharing my past and my mistakes, hoping that my honesty would bring us closer, that he'd see the real me. Instead, all I got in return was rejection. He didn't even let me explain myself fully. Um, at first, I was furious. How could he dismiss me so easily? How could he throw everything away after I trusted him enough to tell him the truth? The unfairness of it all burned in my chest. I had tried to do the right thing, to be honest with him, but to him, it was like my past was an unforgivable mark I could never erase. He couldn't look past it, and that hurt more than I expected. I had hoped that, given time, he might come to understand, but instead, it felt like my honesty had been my undoing. That anger didn't last long, though. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how entitled I had been. I expected Albert to just accept everything, my flaws, my history, my baggage, without ever considering how my choices might affect him. I wanted him to forgive me without asking myself if I'd have been willing to meet him halfway. Sure, I'd told him everything, but I hadn't stopped to think about whether his values might clash with mine. Maybe his views on relationships didn't align with the life I'd led. I'd hoped my looks and charm would be enough to win him over, but I had forgotten that a real relationship needs more than that. It requires depth, and I was starting to see just how much I lacked that. Deep down, I knew I'd relied too heavily on my appearance and my sexuality. It had worked for so long, but now I was facing the consequences. It felt like I had traded away the qualities that truly mattered: trust, emotional connection, stability, for fleeting validation. And now, standing alone, I realized I had no foundation for anything real. I had been so caught up in the idea of empowerment, believing that being with more men meant I was in control of my life. Society told me I was liberated, making my own choices and living on my terms. But when I looked back, all I saw was emptiness. Sure, I'd had moments of independence, but none of them had brought me real fulfillment. Even with all of this weighing on me, one question kept haunting me: how honest should I be in the future? Was I supposed to tell every guy I dated the full truth about my past? Was that the only way to avoid them finding out later and walking away? I wanted to be open, but the thought terrified me. If I told the truth, would I just scare them off? Look at what happened with Albert. He couldn't handle it. But if I lied or kept parts of myself hidden, would that really be any better? What if they eventually found out the truth and felt betrayed? I felt trapped in a cycle I couldn't escape. Could I ever truly start over? Was there any way to move beyond my past and create a genuine, lasting connection? Every time I thought about it, the fear crept back in, and my past felt like a shadow, always following me, waiting to resurface at the worst possible moment. Would anyone ever be able to accept me for who I was trying to become rather than who I had been? I didn't know the answer. Maybe I'd never find someone who could accept me, or maybe I would, but I knew one thing for certain: I had to try. I owed it to myself to move forward, not with the weight of my past dragging me down, but with the hope that the person I was becoming could finally find the stability and love I had always wanted.